This is my true story. I worked, I saved, and I trusted. Every coin I earned was tucked away with love, meant to give my son the life I never had. I thought my sacrifice would make him proud. But one morning, the bank papers told me the truth. My savings were gone. When I confronted him, he didn't deny it. He looked at me, smirked, and laughed in my face. That laugh froze my heart forever. But I did not shout. I planned. Before I continue, tell me where you're watching from. And please subscribe so more people can hear my story. I saved for decades, in silence, in small ways that no one noticed. Every pay I brought home, I kept a little aside. Some weeks it was a few coins, some weeks a folded note, sometimes nothing at all when the rent or food took it all. But always, I kept something hidden away. I used old envelopes, tucked them in drawers, and wrote dates on the corners. Later, when I opened a bank account, I carried the same habit forward, deposits that seemed too small to matter, but over the years grew into something strong. That money was not for me. It was for him. My son. When he was a boy, I sat him on my knee and showed him how to count change. I would spill coins onto the table and guide his small fingers as he stacked them. Pennies make nickels, nickels make dimes, dimes make dollars, I told him. He laughed, eyes wide, as if money was magic. I thought those lessons would grow with him. I thought he would learn that saving is discipline, that patience is strength. Each deposit I made carried the memory of those little lessons. Every coin was not just money, it was a promise I was making to my son's future. As he grew, I gave him more trust. I showed him the passbook, the one the teller stamped each month. I explained how interest worked, how balances grew if you left them alone. I thought I was planting seeds. I thought one day he would thank me for the years I carried, for the life I denied myself so he could live better. I wore the same shoes for 10 years so I could add to that account. I ate simple bread when I wanted meat so the balance would not fall. I never bought myself new things. I let my coat grow thin. I patched my pants. When neighbors bought televisions, I kept mine old. When coworkers went on holidays, I stayed home. All of it, I told myself, was worth it. Because one day my son would open the account, see what I had saved, and know how much I loved him. That account was not just money. It was decades of sweat. It was nights I walked home in the cold after working late. It was mornings I woke before sunrise to earn more. It was the meals I skipped, the things I never bought, the laughter I swallowed when people asked why I lived so small. It was my life in numbers. And all of it, every cent, was meant for him. So when I saw the missing balance, when I saw the bank slip that said my money was gone, my chest cracked. The banker's eyes looked at me with pity. He slid the paper across the desk, and I read my son's name. My son. The one I taught to save. The one I trusted. His name signed bold beside the withdrawal. The numbers erased. My savings drained. It was not just money stolen. It was years of sacrifice stolen. It was dignity stolen. It was a father's love turned into a joke. That trust, the trust I had built with my own blood and years, broke in a second. The morning I saw the withdrawal, my hands shook so badly I could hardly hold the paper. The numbers screamed louder than any voice. Thousands gone. Decades gone. All of it wiped in one night. At first I thought maybe it was a mistake, maybe the bank had made an error. But then I saw the signature. Not mine. His. My son's. Bold. Careless. As if my life's work was his to claim. My throat closed as I stared at the slip. I had trusted him with access, thinking it was safe. I had believed he would respect what I had built. That belief shattered right there at the banker's desk. I walked home heavy, each step slower than the last. I wanted to believe there was an explanation. Maybe he needed it for something urgent. Maybe he panicked. Maybe he would tell me why and I would understand. But deep down, the cold truth pressed harder. He had taken it because he thought he could. Because he thought my silence meant weakness. When I entered the kitchen, he was sitting at the table, phone in his hand, a smile on his face. I laid the paper down in front of him. His eyes scanned it, and for a brief second, I thought I would see shame, but there was none. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, smirked, and laughed. Not a nervous laugh, not a mistake laugh, a cruel, sharp laugh that cut through me. "You really thought you could keep it forever?" he said. "It's mine anyway. What's the point of you holding it when you can barely use it?" His words tore through me worse than the theft. The money was gone, but his respect was gone too. That was the greater loss. He did not see a father who worked and sacrificed. He saw an old man he could rob without fear. He saw weakness. He saw something to mock. The laughter echoed in my head long after I left the room. It followed me into the night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, hearing it over and over. Every sound in the dark became his laugh. Every shadow became the slip of paper with his bold name signed on it. My chest ached with fury, but I did not let it out. I did not shout. I did not strike. I swallowed it. Because I knew something he did not. Fury can destroy a man, but silence can sharpen him. I made a promise in that silence. He thought theft gave him freedom. He thought laughter gave him power. But I would show him a different truth. Not with fists, not with screams, with patience, with law, with a plan so precise that when it fell, it would erase not just the money he stole, but the pride he built on top of it. That night, his theft became the seed of my revenge. I did not shout that night. I sat very still while the house made its small noises. The kettle boiled, a clock ticked, and his laughter kept ringing in my ears. My hands were cold. My face felt like stone. Fury lived in my chest, but it was not the hot kind that makes a man break things. It was slow and hard. It was the kind that makes a man think clear. I had lived long enough to know a quick voice and quick hands lead to regret. I wanted no regret. I wanted a result. So I let the anger sit with me like a weight. I watched him move around like he owned the rooms. I watched him touch the chair I had paid for, the table I had saved for. He did not look back at me. He did not feel a thing. That lack of feeling turned my heat into ice. The ice made my mind sharp. I began to list everything he had used that came from my work. The house, the car, the phone, the friends who laughed. I listed each thing slowly, like a man counting his last coins. Each item was a reason. Each reason gave me a step. At dawn, I rose and made my plan. I did not go to the bank that day with a shout. I put on my coat and walked slow to the place I had trusted for years. The teller smiled like she always did. She did not know what my chest held. I sat down and I asked for copies of statements. I spoke softly. I asked about the transfers and the account history. The bank clerk gave me papers. I took them home and put them on my table and read them until my eyes burned. Reading the papers made the picture very clear. He had used his access well. He had taken money at night so no one would watch. He had spent some, he had saved some, he had shown off some. Each move was a small act of carelessness on his part, but together they were a great crime. I felt the old hurt return. This was not just an act of need. It was an act of taking joy in what I had done so I would not have it. He had laughed while he stole. But I did not go back to him and break down. I did not fill the house with cries. I wrote down names and places instead. I wrote down the small banks he used, the men he paid, the friends he boasted to. I wrote down every small thing that could be used to find how he spent the money. I wanted facts. I wanted proof. I wanted a clean line from his hand to the debt he made. Rage will make a man rush. Paper will make a man lose. After that, I went to the lawyer. I walked in like a man with a job to do. The lawyer greeted me and poured tea, but I had no time for tea. I set the bank papers on his desk and said, "My son took my savings. I want it back. If he will not give it, I want him to lose what he took." The lawyer did not ask for drama. He asked for documents. He asked for names and dates and signatures. I gave them. I did not tell the story with loud voice. I told it with facts. We spoke of law and of limits. The lawyer told me the bank could freeze accounts if fraud was shown. The lawyer told me about safe legal moves that could stop money flowing to men who used it wrong. He told me about transfers, about trust structures, about third parties, and about how paper can cut off a man faster than an angry shout. I listened and nodded. I asked only for two things: make it clean and make it final. I had no wish to waste time on long fights that would eat my strength. I wanted a right answer that could not be turned by a loud mouth. So we made small moves first. We asked the bank for a freeze on any accounts that had recent irregular transfers linked to his name. We opened new accounts in my name alone. We made sure no joint access remained where he could reach. Each small step tightened the net without telling him it was there. He had used the night for his theft. I used the day for my work. Night hides greed. Day hides work. At home, I watched him with a new eye. He talked to his friends. He boasted. He walked with his chest out like a man with luck. But the world had already started to shift in quiet ways he could not feel. A contractor he owed money to got a polite call asking for proof of deposit. A partner he had counted on received a legal letter asking for clarification on a wired sum. Small things. Little taps that would not make noise but would call attention. He could not see the moves because he had not learned to watch. He had only learned to take. When he asked me for help again, I said nothing. My silence became a tool. Silence makes a man look for answers in time. He would call and get no answer. He would find gates and papers and people who waited for proof that never came. I let my quiet be the first answer he faced. He started to feel the small cracks. It is easy to tell men to be kind. It is harder to teach them to plan. I had spent years building a small life with slow saving. Those years taught me patience and the value of the long step. My son had learned only the quick step. He did not know how to plan the long revenge. That gave me the edge. While his laughter sat heavy in my chest, my pen moved. Paper became my weapon. Law became my shield. There was no pleasure in this. I do not enjoy seeing another man fall, even when that man is my child. But the cold truth is, if you make your life with someone's hands and that someone laughs while they take it, you must answer with the same level of truth. He had violated the trust that joins a father and a son. I could not take back the laughs. I could not be his fool any longer. The quiet fury turned into careful work. Each signed paper was a step away from being used. I wrote checks, I moved money, I placed holds, and I watched the quiet happen. I kept a copy of every paper in a small folder. It felt heavy in my hand. It felt like a final weight of many years. I did not brag about it. I did not tell the world. I simply did the work that had to be done. I wanted him to feel the result, not the show. By the time the real work showed its face, he had already started to see small things go wrong. A call he expected to be paid bounced. A man who had promised him cash grew quiet. He called me, panicked, and I listened like a stone. He begged once, twice. His voice got small. He tried to laugh, and the sound cracked. I heard the old brotherhood in him vanish. He had taken my savings thinking himself clever. Now he was losing their support to a slow legal trap. His pride would break with the sound of silence. Through all this, I kept my head low. I carried on with my day. I swept the floor. I fixed a broken chair leg. I boiled a pot of soup and fed the cat. Those small acts kept me steady. The loudest part of me lived in the papers. The quiet part lived in my hands as they did small, honest work. The two together made the plan true. That is the way of long men. They use the small things to change the big things. When the day came that the bank called him to ask where certain transfers had gone, he could not laugh. The laughter had been his armor. Without it, he was raw. He had to talk to men with papers and signatures who did not know him. They asked for proof he did not have. He had used my trust like it was a toy. Now those toys were gone, and the men who once cheered him were silent. The quiet fury had done its slow work. The plan was moving like a river cutting rock. You do not see the cut until the stone falls. I do not celebrate in screams. I do not dance on the ashes of his pride. I do not want to be a cruel man at heart. But I also knew that a father who is laughed at in his own house must not die with a laugh in his ears. I had given him lessons and love and coin. He gave me the theft and the laugh. So I used the law and time to answer. The quiet fury kept me honest and gave the best, cold result I could get. There was a man in town my son always hated. He owned a small field near the road. Years ago, they argued over a fence. My son talked loud about that fight sometimes, like it was a joke. He liked to tell the story at parties. The man never shouted back. He kept his mouth shut and his hands clean. He could not forget the words, though. Men like that keep memory in their bones. I had seen the two of them stand opposite each other at the fair once, and my son's face had been red with pride. He had sneered. He had shown his teeth. The look on the other man's face was quiet, not loud. It stayed with me. I did not plan to hurt that man. I never wanted to make trouble for him. But I also did not want my son to keep his new money safe. My son loved pain as if it were a game. He stole, and then he laughed. That laugh needed to stop. I thought, if he loves the shine of easy money, let him watch it go dull. If he loves the game of showing off, let him play with a strange table. The man near the field had a name and a history that could make a show. He had old fights in his past and neighbors who remembered. That memory could be part of the snare. I chose that name, not to enrich him, but to use the shape of a past I knew would sting my son. I sat on my step and wrote the name down on a small piece of paper. I did not whisper it to friends. I did not shout it in the street. I carried the name in my head like a key. My plan would not be loud. It would be clean. It would use the rules the world already obeys. The law listens to paper. The law can place money in places that look safe, but are not for the man who took it. I spoke to my lawyer and said I wanted the money moved into holdings where the man's name would appear in a way that would create trouble for my son. The lawyer raised his brow but did not ask why. He knew people make strange choices when they are hurt. We wrote papers that moved funds into a trust that had a manager name on it. The name we used was the man by the field. On paper, he looked like the one who took care of the holdings. He did not know at first. The lawyer did not place real power in his hands. We made a structure where the man's name would be used as a face for the holding. But we also added rules that would cause big trouble if the holding tried to move money in ways the law could not clean. Paper can hide truth, but paper can also reveal it slowly, like water through soil. The man's name would be the cloth that showed the stain when trouble came. I thought of my son seeing his money in an account with that name. I thought of how his chest would rise and fall when he saw something he thought was safe. He would feel proud again for a moment, and then the thing would sour. I thought of how neighbors would whisper. I thought of how the man by the field would react when the money was linked to him in a way he could not control. He had people who watched him, people who remembered the old fight. Their eyes would open when they saw a rich holding tied to his name. That attention would not be kind to my son. We placed small strings on the trust. The law would watch the money. If the money changed hands quickly or was spent on strange deals, it would call the names and ask questions. We set trustees in places that would mean any large movement required checks and signatures that my son did not have. We put clauses that made transfers public if someone tried to move things in certain ways. I was not planning theft. I was making a wall. The wall would be thin in some parts and thick in others, but it would stop a man who had taken funds by trick and laughter. I met the man once to explain nothing. I walked past his field and we shared a nod. I did not tell him my plan. Men who keep their hands clean do not live for the praise of others. They live simple. He tended his land, and his life was small. That was not my fault. I carried my guilt like a small stone in my pocket. I told myself the choice was not to punish a stranger, but to take from the thief the pleasure of showing off. The man might have trouble, or he might not. The law would make the story public enough to hurt my son in the place he loved most, the eyes of the town. When the papers were signed, the name appeared in the bank records. The holding looked proper. It looked real. The enemy's name sat like a stamp at the head of the file. To most people, it meant nothing. It was just another name. To those who knew the past, to those who remembered the fence and the words, it would mean trouble. That was the seed. A seed of public doubt could grow fast in small places. Pride feeds on light. Once the light fades, pride falls silent. My son's light would go out. I watched him for days after. He went about his life as if nothing had changed. He bought new things and showed them off. He called friends and laughed. He thought the money he took had made him free. He did not see the thread I had tied. He did not know the man's name was part of a plan. He used the money like a man who thinks the world owes him. But I saw how quickly the town's eyes moved. A contractor would ask who managed the holding. A partner would ask the name and frown. The small questions piled up like small stones on a path. He would have to walk on them soon. This was not about cruelty to a neighbor. It was about teaching a son that theft and laughter have costs. It was about showing him that the world keeps records. It was about using the town's memory, not to hurt an innocent man for nothing, but to make a stage where my son's arrogance would be visible. I did not take pleasure in the idea of his ruin. I took pleasure in the idea that the laugh he gave me would one day echo back at him in a way he would not like. That is a cold thought, but it is a fair one. He had made the choice to laugh while he stole. Now he would live with the sound of it as ruin came. The enemy named was a quiet tool. It made the movement of funds look legal at first. It made the falling apart loud later. I used law, names, and memory to make a problem that could not be fixed with jokes. That is how old men win battles against the quick and loud. Use time, use paper, use the town's small memory. Let the slow truth do the work the shout cannot do. My son laughed at me. The man by the field would help my plan show him what his laughter had earned. I went to my lawyer with steady steps and a quiet face. He had known me for years. He sat behind his desk and listened without surprise. I gave him the bank papers, the withdrawal slips, the name I had chosen. I did not shout. I did not plead. I showed him the facts. He turned pages slowly and asked calm questions. I answered with short words. He wrote notes. Then he told me what the law would do. Paper is a tool. The lawyer said this plainly. Paper can move money, hold money, hide money, and reveal money. It can protect what is yours, or it can make a trap for what was taken. We spoke of trusts first. A trust is a box you put money into and name a keeper. If you set it right, no one can take the money out without the rules being met. I told him I wanted a box that my son could not open. He nodded. He wrote the kind of trust that uses hard language, words that a judge will not break easily. We talked of naming a manager for the trust. The lawyer warned me that a name on paper is not always power. A name can be paper thin, but if you add steps, witnesses, and rules, the name becomes heavy. I wanted heavy. I wanted rules that said the manager must follow proof, receipts, and checks. I wanted time delays, so a man who wanted to move money fast would have to wait while papers sat in offices. The lawyer showed me clauses that made sudden moves hard. We picked those clauses, and we used them. Next, we spoke of transfers. Money moves by orders and stamps. A transfer can go through many doors. The lawyer said to use doors that need more than one key. We set accounts that required 2 signatures. We set trustees who had to sign. We added audit steps. Each added step made it harder for a thief to move the money. My son had used speed and night to take. I used slowness and law to stop him. The night hides greed. The law hides work. I chose the law. We wrote witness statements. A witness is a person who says what they saw and signs their name. The lawyer told me witnesses make words stronger. He said get 2 witnesses who would stand to say the truth. I picked men and women who had always been honest in town. They came to the office and signed. Their names were put on paper. Their hands shook a little. They knew what it meant. They knew what my son had done. They signed because paper needs witnesses to be loud later. We made some moves at the bank with careful speech. I asked the bank to flag any movement out of accounts with links to his name. I asked them to hold any big send until they called me. They agreed. Banks like clear orders. They like rules. They do not like drama. The clerk put stamps on the forms and slid them across. I kept a copy of each stamped page in a folder in my coat. I carried the folder like a man carrying a small lamp. The lamp showed the way in dark rooms. We spoke of deed changes, too. The lawyer asked what property was still in my name. I had a small piece of land and a shed. Little things. But papers are chains. If you move a deed, you close a door. We wrote new deeds that placed property into the trust. The land moved by signatures and a notary. The notary signed and stamped. The deed was recorded in the public book so any man could see the change if he looked. I wanted public steps. I wanted a record. The record would be a stone mark on the path. Where my son saw quick gain, he would find a long trail. We used irrevocable language for some items. Irrevocable means it is hard to undo. It is like baking bread. Once done, you cannot unbake it. The lawyer explained it plain. If you put money into an irrevocable trust, getting it back is not simple. It takes court and proof. I chose irrevocable where I could. I did not want a man who stole to show up later and claim mistake. He had no right. Paper would not give him one. We also set small rules to make the trust public when certain acts happened. For example, if anyone tried to sell the land faster than a set time, the trustees would have to call a public meeting and list the buyers. If anyone tried to withdraw a sum over a limit, all trustees would get a notice and a waiting period. These small steps sound slow, but they make trouble loud. My son loved showing off in the bar. He would hate being the man who had to explain in public why he moved money fast. The lawyer agreed. He said, "Make the move public if the thief moves fast." Then we planned for reaction. A man who steals will rage. He will rush to friends. He will try to move other things. The lawyer told me to record every step and keep copies safe. He told me to make sure the trustee names were people who would stand firm. I chose a few folks who had no love for my son's loud ways. They were calm, not cruel. They signed the papers. They agreed to their duty. They would not help a quick man who came with a smile. We also set a small gift for the town. I told the lawyer I did not want this to be a mean work. I wanted a place where the money could do good if the trust sat idle. He set a clause to move small help to a local place that fixed fences and fed children. That made the trust look clean and made the town ready to watch. I wanted the truth to be clear. If my son used my money to laugh, the money would go to good work. If he tried to hide, the law would force it into the open. That was fair. The lawyer stamped each paper twice. His hand was steady. I signed where needed. Each signature felt like a small hammer on a gate. I put my name down with a slow hand. The papers were filed. The clerk took copies and put them in the bank's safe. I left copies in 2 places, the lawyer's safe and a lockbox at the other bank branch. I kept nothing in my home that could be burned or lost. The law needs records, not hands. When the work was done, we had a net of paper and rule. It was not a trap of malice. It was a shield of law. The money I had saved was now under watches and delays. The man whose name I had used as the face of the holding would now have to follow the rules if he tried anything. My son would find the money where it looked to be safe, but the rules made it fragile to him. He could not move it without making his theft public. He could not claim it without stepping into the light. The legal thread had no sound. It had no shout. It had only stamps, dates, names, and witness signatures. But when the net tightened, the sound would be loud in the place my son loved most, in the town's talk, in the calls from partners, in the cold silence of men who would no longer trust him. I walked out of the lawyer's office with the paper in my pocket and the weight like a period at the end of a sentence. I did not smile. I did not dance. I only felt the cold clarity of a man who had been mocked. Paper had become the voice I used. The law had become the hand that would reach where my voice could not. The legal thread was set. Now the slow work would do its job. The town would watch. The man who laughed in my face would soon see how loud the silence of paper can be. After the lawyer stamped the papers and the bank clerk filed the copies, I let the plan sit like a quiet stone. The moves we made were small in the day, but heavy in their meaning. I did not race to show anyone. I did not tell a soul. I kept the folder in my coat and folded my days into small chores while the changes took root. A plan that looks slow is harder to stop. A man who laughs at night cannot see the work done by the day. I watched my son with steady eyes as the paperwork moved in the offices where men wear ties and do not gossip. To him, nothing had changed. He still used the new phone, still drove the car, still told long stories to men who nodded. He thought the money he took had made him free. He was wrong. We had moved the funds into accounts with names that did not match his little world. The holdings looked clean on paper. They looked like careful law work a banker would approve. That was the point. Anyone who glanced at the books would say, "Everything is in order." But inside those checks, we had set locks and slow gates. We had made rules that called for time, witnesses, and proofs. If a man tried to move money fast, the pages would shout. The law would demand records. The law does not like hurry. My son had used night and hurry. I used the slow turning of paper and stamp. The quiet net was in place. The man I had named as the face of the holding had a small life. He tended his field and kept his mouth shut. He did not know the tight rules that bound the money to proof and pause. He did not know how messy it could look when partners asked for receipts and his answer had no proof to give. We made the holding lean on him in name, not in skill. The name would draw eyes, and those eyes could make noise. The town remembers old fights. When people saw a holding tied to him, they would ask and remember. A memory like that is sharp. My son loved others' eyes on him. That would now be his knife. I left no trap for the town or the man in the field. I left only a structure that would make sudden moves hard. The trust rules called for 2 or 3 signatures on large sums. They required receipts for payments above a set number. They required public notice for quick sales. The bank set alerts to call me when any unusual move came through. The trustees we named agreed to check before any large shift. If someone tried to hide a move, the checks would force open a path to the truth. The truth is heavy and slow. It walks the road from office to office and knocks on the doors of men who made promises. I watched the small things change first. A contractor called my son and asked for a clear copy of a deposit. The contractor had seen a name on a sheet that did not match the phone the money came from. That call was a small blade that cut a little thread. My son answered angrily. He tried to show the man a stamped slip. The man frowned. He wanted more proof. Then a partner asked for a contract and found a page missing a needed signature. Little things stacked up like small stones until walking became slower. He grew impatient. I smiled little in my head but said nothing. Patience in old men is a bitter seed. It grows into a tree that stands when the quick men fall. Because the trust made some parts public when others tried to move fast, the town would soon know enough to speak. Men in suits do not gossip like boys. They make calls and send papers. Those calls bring men to doors. When a man who had been proud found men at his door asking for proof he could not give, the laughter leaves quick. Pride is a warm coat until winter comes. Then the coat looks thin and the man feels cold. I had learned that lesson in my bones from years of work. My son learned it in a louder way. The town watched. He tried to hide the change by acting as if nothing had happened. He bought rounds for men in a bar and told the story of his good luck. He posted pictures, he told jokes. But men who make deals with other men do not accept only laughter. They accept proof. When proof did not come, deals slowed. A man who thinks the world owes him is the most dangerous kind of fool. He spends first and asks questions later. Those who lent him trust now found reasons to wait. The waiting is a blade. It cuts slow but deep. I prepared for his reaction in other ways. I left copies of the papers with the lawyer and a trusted neighbor who had nothing to gain. I told them only what they needed to know. Hold the papers. Show them if things go wrong. I was careful who I trusted. A plan is only as good as the men you choose to hold it. The neighbor had always been straight. He had no love for loud acts, and he had once helped me fix a fence. He signed to be a witness. A witness is a small name but a big thing when trouble comes. I kept my folder safe and my voice lower than the house clock. When the money sat in its new place, it seemed like nothing to the busy world. That was best. The world moves fast and looks only at the bright flame. A plan that looks calm is like water under ice. The thief cannot see the depth. He can only see the sparkle on top. My son had taken my savings like a man who sees a bright coin and forgets to look for the catch. He wanted that quick light. I wanted the slow depth. So I let the lights go on while the hidden path held the thing he loved. By the time the first contractor called, the holding had begun to show its teeth. He could not move funds without the names and stamps we had set. He could not prove this and that without showing the trail. He had thought the money was his to spend, But every time he tried to use it for something large, the trust stepped in and asked for proof. Those questions made him angry. When a man is angry and cannot do what he wants, he breaks small things first. He calls men who now ask for more. Those men ask where the money came from and why it sits under a name that raises old memories. The town asked, the papers answered, and my son's loud life became thin. It is not a fun thing to watch a child fall. It is not joy for me. What I felt was a cold satisfaction that something true had been set right. He had taken and laughed. I had used the law to take back permission to be free. He could not have his ill-gotten gain and keep his face in the town. The slow work did what a shout could not. The law and paper do not care for pride. They care for stamps and witnesses and proof. That was the net I had spun. In the end, the setup was complete. The papers were filed, the bank had the orders, the trustees were ready, and the town would watch. The man's name on the holding would ask questions. My son, who had laughed in my face, would now be the one who had to stand and explain his actions in the harsh light of office rooms and recorded lines. He had chosen to steal in the dark. I had chosen to answer in the day. The day would bring men with papers, and the papers would show his theft. That is how slow plans win. They are not loud, they are final. The change came faster than I expected, not because I did anything loud, but because the rules we set moved like a slow wind and then a storm. Dawn came, and the day looked the same. My son woke up and checked his phone. He still felt rich in the head. He had the swagger of a man who thinks the world owes him. But the world is run by people who keep records, and records do not lie. Small calls, small questions, little pauses. Those were the first cracks. The first sign was a message from a contractor. He was a loud man who had built a small room for my son the week before. The message said he could not continue work until a deposit was confirmed. My son laughed it off and walked to the bank he used. He tried to move money. The bank stopped him. The clerk asked for proof of source. That is the neat part of law and paper. It asks one clear thing, and if you cannot show it, the move stops. He called his friends. He called the men who had helped him before. They listened and gave the same advice. Show the papers. Show the receipts. He had none. The transfers I had found were not hidden well enough. They were recorded. The new holdings showed an owner name and trustees. The bank would not simply move funds without checks. My son, who had taken in night for ease, found the doors closed in daylight. Then partners began to step back. A man who sells materials would not risk credit when a trust looks messy. He called my son and asked for a clear line of payment. My son sent his boasting voice over the line, but the man wanted stamped proof. He wanted a receipt in the name of the trust, a signature that matched the public record. When it did not come, the man grew quiet. He pulled his men away. He wrote a short note. We cannot proceed without proof. The kind of quiet that kills a plan. Creditors smelled the change. They always do. When one account shows irregular moves into holdings and then little evidence of clear control, creditors raise flags. Men who had once lent my son money began to ask for payment. Their calls are sharp. They leave no room for jokes. A man who borrows on pride must pay with facts. When facts are missing, the shame grows. News moved in town like slow water. Men in offices make calls, and then other men in the cafe talk. I do not like gossip, but I know how it moves. The name we put on the holding, my son's old enemy, made people remember old times. They would ask, why is he on the paper? Those who remembered the fence and the fight felt a small sting watching his name on a trust that now had big sums. It is not right to use memory to hurt, but memory opens eyes. People ask questions. Questions spread like a chain of small knocks. They do not stop until someone opens the door. My son tried to fight at first. He sent messages in heated words, and he called men who once closed their ears to his debts. He begged some to help and paid others in cash. But cash is small when a trust holds millions on paper. You cannot buy proof with pockets full of coins if the law asks for a stamp and a witness. He tried to move parts of the funds through men he thought friendly. The trustees blocked the moves until proof came. The rules we set did their job. He could not make the paper lie. Panic ate at him in private. He would sit at night and refresh his bank app until his eyes hurt. He would call a woman who once promised to cover a debt, just this once. She did not answer. Friends who used to praise him turned their faces. The calls became short, urgent, and then silent. A man who shows off in the light loses the light first when it is time to pay attention to proof. Then came the morning the tow truck pulled his car. A notice had been sent for non-payment to a company he had paid with a check that bounced. The bank had flagged the check. The company did not trust his word anymore. Men watched him stand on the sidewalk as a flatbed took his car away. Neighbors who had once nodded now whispered. The look on his face was not the mock of a thief anymore. It was the hollow of a man who is losing skin from the inside out. Contracts were canceled. Partners who had planned deals saw risk in the name on file. When they asked for clarity and the reply took days, they walked. Men do not like to work where the pay might not come. The empty contracts left rooms in his life that he once filled with noise. He spent fast and loud. Now rooms were empty. Pride turns out to be light. Without money, it is gone. His social circle dwindled. Where once men would crowd his table and drink to his luck, now there were fewer faces. Invitations stopped coming. His posts on social pages went without the applause he craved. He saw too late how much of his life had been show and how little was real. People do not stand by those whose names come with questions. They step back, and that step starts a long fall. His wife, if she had thought the stolen money would keep her happy, saw the strain. She packed a bag and left for a sister's place for a night, and then another night. She said words about needing time. I do not blame her wholly. People leave when the safety net becomes holes. I watched from a distance with no joy. I remembered a small boy and then a man who laughed at his old father. There was a cost to both memories. Meanwhile, the man whose name we used reacted too. He had no care for big money or for my son's style. He was a simple man pushed into a place he did not want. He started to make mistakes. People asked him for receipts, and he gave small, clumsy answers. His life was not in business talk. He made moves that looked odd. The holding began to look messy. Mess attracts attention. The messy files drew bank inspectors and lawyers. The same people who once nodded now wanted clarity. The spotlight hit hard. By nightfall, my son's world had shifted. The men he had counted on had told him to wait. The bank had put holds and asked for proof. The contractor stopped work. An email came from a partner. We cannot move forward. His phone buzzed with names asking for payments and proof. The laughter he once carried cracked. He sat in a chair and stared. The pennies of his bravado were gone from his hands. He could not find the voice to laugh anymore. The town started to whisper openly. People who had once cheered him now said small words behind curtains. My son was left with the sound of his own breathing and the echo of a paper trail that did not favor him. He had wanted to show, to boast, to mock. Instead, he had to stand and answer. The law, quiet and steady, had done the work I could not do with anger. The paper and the rules had taken his shine away in a single day. I do not say I was happy. The loss of a child is a wound no plan can heal. But the cold feeling that was left was cleaner than the hot pain of that first night. The man who had laughed in my face now sat in a room of small echoes. He had taken what was mine and used it like a prize. He had not thought the law would answer. He had not thought a slow plan would move like water and drown his loud life. Overnight, he lost the things he had built on the back of my sweat. I walked home that evening and sat by my window. The town lights were small. I did not shout. I did not laugh. I only felt the weight of long years and the small, steady hand of the law. The storm had come and cleared the air. The quiet was heavy, but it was mine. The theft had been answered. The collapse had been complete. The son who laughed had seen his world go thin, and the world had a new story to tell. The fall came in front of everyone, not in secret, not in the dark, but out where eyes could see. It began with whispers in the bank lobby. A clerk spoke in a low tone, but words travel fast. People heard that my son's accounts were flagged, that his papers were messy, that his money was not truly his. In a small town, news spreads like fire on dry grass. By noon, neighbors were looking at him with tilted heads. Men who had once shaken his hand crossed the street instead. Friends who drank his liquor at night now sent short excuses, or none at all. Creditors made the fall sharper. They came not with polite letters but with hard knocks. They wanted money back, and they wanted it now. My son could not show them clean proof. He waved his arms, shouted, laughed like nothing was wrong. But paper speaks louder than noise. The receipts were gone. The accounts were sealed. The trust held the wealth behind locks he could not open. His voice grew thinner with each visit. People stopped listening. They only wanted what was owed. His wife felt the shame next. She was used to posting pictures of full tables and new dresses. Now her cards failed at the counter. Declined, decline, decline. The machine does not care for pride. Her face burned red in the shop. The clerk stared. Other women whispered. She went home and threw her phone on the table. Neighbors saw her leave the house with fewer bags. The woman who once laughed at me now walked with her head down. Pride leaves faster than money. The final blow was public. A partner he bragged about brought a lawyer to a cafe. They put papers on the table. The lawyer asked for proof of ownership, proof of transfer, proof of funds. My son had nothing but stories. Stories do not stop law. People in the cafe turned their heads. They saw him stammer, saw him sweat. The man who once told jokes about his rich father now begged for time. No one laughed with him. They only watched. That day, he came home with a face pale as ash. He slammed doors. He threw papers. He shouted at shadows. But rage does not change records. His name was now linked to shame, to theft, to ruin. The pride he built on stolen savings collapsed under the weight of truth, and the town saw every brick fall. When the noise of his fall filled the town, I sat in my chair and felt no cheer. People think revenge brings fire, but it does not. It brings cold. A father does not grow happy from watching his son beg. A father feels heavy, like carrying a stone that cannot be put down. I did not clap my hands when I heard his wife left him. I did not smile when men told me his partners walked away. I only sat still. The quiet around me was deep. It was not joy. It was not grief. It was a silence that cut both ways. At night, I remembered the boy he once was. The boy with small hands who reached for mine when crossing the street. The boy who sat by me as I counted coins and asked me to tell him about money. The boy who promised he would take care of me when I grew old. Those memories stayed inside me like warm fires. But they sat beside new memories now. The paper with his name stealing my work. The smirk on his face. The laugh that mocked me. Old love and new betrayal sat together, and they tore at each other. I thought about the meals I skipped so he could eat. I thought about the boots I wore until the soles were thin. I thought about the years of saving, every penny I folded away in envelopes. All of it meant for him. All of it meant for a future he had spit on with his theft. My chest ached when I thought of it. It was not the ache of weakness. It was the ache of a man who had given everything and learned too late that love had not been returned. The nights were the hardest. In the day I could walk, sweep the porch, polish my shoes, do small tasks. In the night I only heard his laugh echo in my head. That laugh was sharper than the cold outside. It reminded me why I had done what I did. It reminded me that silence was my only shield. But still, it hurt. A father does not stop loving. A father only learns that love can turn to ash when it is mocked. I tried to tell myself that what I had done was not cruelty. I had not raised a hand to him. I had not shouted, had not cursed. I had only used the law, the same law that protects any man who works. The law was my tool, not my rage. But when I looked at his face in memory, pale and broken, I wondered if I had gone too far. A father should not be the one to end his own son's pride. And yet, what choice had he left me? If I had done nothing, he would have taken more. If I had stayed silent, he would have laughed louder. The cost was heavy. Revenge always takes something from the one who carries it. I lost the little I had left of family. The table at holidays was empty now. The phone was silent. No son came to ask if I needed bread. No child came to sit by my fire. I had chosen to cut the rope, and the cut was final. The quiet was mine, but it was lonely. I told myself over and over, I did not start this. He started it when he stole. He started it when he laughed. I finished it. That was all. But the heart does not care for logic. The heart remembers both the betrayal and the love. It makes a man feel both victor and victim at once. That is the true cost. Not money, not property, but the heavy weight that never lifts. I still walked past people in town. Some nodded with respect, some looked away. I could see in their eyes that they knew. They knew what I had done. Some thought it was justice. Some thought it was cruel. But none of them knew the full cost. None of them sat awake at night hearing their child's laugh like a knife. None of them carried the memory of soft hands turning into stealing hands. That weight was mine alone. I kept living, small and quiet. I ate my meals in silence. I folded my coat carefully each night. I lit a candle in the dark and watched the flame move. And I told myself one truth. I had no regrets. Regret is for men who have choices. I had none. He took my life's work and mocked me. The law gave me one path, and I took it. But even without regret, I could not escape the cost. Revenge had given me peace, but peace was cold and lonely. That was the trade. That was the price. The end came with no noise, no shouting, no fight, no last scene in the street. It ended the way most things end, with silence and with truth. My son had lost his shine. The money he stole was gone. The pride he carried was broken. The friends he loved to show off to had left. The wife who once clapped at his jokes had packed her bags. And I was left alone with the papers in my hand, the proof that my revenge was real and final. I walked through the town one last time and saw the looks on people's faces. Some looked at me with pity, some with respect, some with fear. But I did not care for any of it. What mattered was simple. I had taken back my dignity. The man who thought he could steal from me and laugh in my face had been stripped of his power. He had learned that paper, law, and patience can break louder than fists. I did not need to shout. I did not need to strike. I only needed to wait. His name is now tied to failure. His laugh is now tied to shame. Wherever he goes, people remember not his success, but his fall. That is the mark he chose for himself. That is the price he paid for mocking his father. As for me, I live quietly. I do not live rich, but I live free. My savings are safe, my trust is sealed, my peace is guarded. I no longer wake to the sound of creditors. I no longer fear that my work will be stolen in the dark. I sit by my window and drink my tea, and the quiet feels honest, even if it feels cold. I lost a son the day he chose betrayal. That wound will never close, but I kept my soul the day I chose justice. That choice cannot be taken from me. The law was my hammer, patience was my shield, and silence was my weapon. Final thought. He stole my savings and laughed. I gave everything to his enemy, and overnight, his life crumbled. He mocked me once, but now the whole world mocks him. And I never looked back.